The Tudors Dynasty Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rebecca Larson. On today's episode, we dive into the lives of two extraordinary women who transformed the literary world, Jane Austen and Mary Shelley. Though they came from different worlds, their shared passion for storytelling left a huge mark on history. Jane Austen, raised in the lively home of a country rector in Steventon, Hampshire, used her sharp wit and keen insight to paint vivid portraits of Regency society and timeless works like Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility. Meanwhile, Mary Shelley, shaped by a life of early independence and profound tragedy, broke new ground with Frankenstein, a masterpiece that pioneered the science fiction genre. Join me as we explore the lives, challenges, and enduring legacies of these two remarkable authors, whose voices continue to inspire readers across the centuries. Born on the 16th of December, 1775, in Steventon, Hampshire, Jane Austen grew up in a lively household that would later inspire her vivid portrayals of Regency England. Her father, George Austen, was a rector, and her mother, Cassandra, balanced their bustling family life. Jane was the seventh of 8 children, with 6 brothers and just one sister, also named Cassandra after their mother, a bond that would remain one of the strongest in Jane's life. The Austen home was always brimming with activity. In addition to their large family, George Austen often brought pupils to live with them, making their home anything but quiet. Outside, the family tended a small farm, producing vegetables from the garden and meat from their livestock, with the help of maids and manservants to manage the household. It was a life filled with people, conversation, and stories, ingredients that would shape Jane's future as one of England's greatest novelists. Jane's father was a firm believer in education for both boys and girls, a progressive view for the time. At just 6 years old, Jane and her sister Cassandra were sent to school in Oxford and later Southampton. However, their schooling was cut short when both contracted what was known as putrid fever, or typhus, forcing them to return home to recover. The sisters later attended the Abbey House School in Reading, where their education went beyond the typical subject for girls. Alongside needlework, music, drawing, and dancing, they also studied writing, spelling, French, history, and geography. After their time at school, their education continued at home, with unrestricted access to their father's library. It was there, surrounded by shelves of books, that Jane discovered her love of reading, a passion that would lay the foundation for her extraordinary literary career. At just 11 years old, Jane began crafting short stories and sketches to amuse her family and friends. During her teenage years, her writing took on a playful and rebellious tone. Her stories were packed with mischief and mayhem, not action as we think of today, but full of outrageous, entertaining antics. They featured girls who ate and drank to excess, stole money, got into fights, and even ran off with fiancés, sometimes not their own. 3 of Jane's early notebooks, filled with these lively and audacious tales, have been preserved and can now be found in the British Library in London and the Bodleian Library in Oxford. In 1801, Jane Austen moved to Bath with her parents and sister Cassandra. At 25, she was no stranger to the city, having visited it often on holiday. Just a year later, in 1802, she briefly accepted a marriage proposal from Harris Bigwither, a 21-year-old heir from a prominent Hampshire family. However, by the next morning, Jane had a change of heart and called off the engagement. Tragedy struck in 1805 when Jane's father passed away unexpectedly, leaving Jane, Cassandra, and their mother in financial hardship. They moved in with their close friend Martha Lloyd in Southampton and carefully stretched what little income they had. Relief came in 1809 when Jane's brother Edward offered the Austen women a comfortable cottage on his Hampshire estate in the village of Chawton. While living in Steventon, before their move to Bath, Jane had written the first drafts of Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, and Northanger Abbey. When Jane moved into the cottage her brother provided for her, her sister, and her mother, Jane was inspired to start getting Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice ready for production. With her brother's help, they were able to get Sense and Sensibility published anonymously in November of 1811 by Thomas Egerton. She would start writing Mansfield Park that year. Pride and Prejudice would be published in January of 1813, with second editions coming out later that year of both Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice. Mansfield Park would be finished in 1813 and would be published in 1814. Emma would be published in 1815, and a second edition of Mansfield Park would be published in 1816. It's believed that Jane suffered from Addison's disease or Hodgkin's lymphoma. Even though her illness started about 18 months before her death, she still wrote as much as she could. During this time, she began work on Persuasion and Sandition, both of which featured satirical takes on health resorts and the culture of invalidism. Tragically, neither novel would be completed. In May 1817, Jane and her sister Cassandra moved to Winchester to be closer to her physician, Dr. Lifford. Sadly, her condition worsened, and on the 18th of July, 1817, Jane Austen passed away at the age of 41, leaving behind a literary legacy that continues to captivate readers around the world. Mary Shelley, one of literature's greatest female writers, lived a life marked by both extraordinary creativity and profound loss. Born on the 20th of August, 1797, she was the only daughter of the philosopher and political journalist William Godwin and the pioneering feminist Mary Wollstonecraft. Tragically, her mother passed away from childbed fever just 10 days after Mary's birth, leaving her to grow up with her father and older half-sister, Fanny, from her mother's previous relationship. Mary's education came largely from her father's extensive library, where she immersed herself in books and intellectual conversations with prominent figures like Samuel Taylor Coleridge and William Wordsworth. However, life at home grew complicated when her father remarried in 1801 to Mary Jane Clairmont, who brought 2 children of her own, Claire and Charles, into the household. Mary's relationship with her stepmother was strained, and Mary Jane resented the bond between William and his daughter, going so far as to restrict Mary's access to books. Despite these challenges, Mary's literary talents emerged early. She published her first poem at the age of 14. In 1812, Mary temporarily moved to Scotland, living with friends of her father, but returned to London where she met Percy Bysshe Shelley, one of her father's political followers. Percy, the son of a baronet and a member of Parliament, was already married, but that didn't stop him and Mary from beginning a passionate love affair. The two eventually eloped to France, taking Mary's stepsister, Claire, along, much to her father's disapproval. The couple's early years together were filled with financial struggles and personal tragedy. In 1815, Mary gave birth to a daughter who died shortly after birth. The following year, she had a son, William, and joined Percy's friend, the poet Lord Byron, in Switzerland. It was during this time, amidst bad weather and ghost story challenges, that Mary conceived the idea for Frankenstein. The year was also marked by sorrow, as Mary's half-sister Fanny and Percy's estranged wife Harriet both died by suicide. In 1818, Mary's groundbreaking novel Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus, was published anonymously, with many assuming Percy was the author due to his written introduction. Mary was only 20 years old. That same year, her infant daughter Clara died of dysentery, and in 1819, her son William succumbed to malaria at the age of 3. Her surviving son, Percy Florence Shelley, born in 1819, would be the only one of her children to reach adulthood. Again in 1822, tragedy struck when Percy drowned in a sailing accident off the coast of Italy. Devastated but determined, Mary returned to England and focused on preserving Percy's literary legacy, publishing his posthumous poems in 1824. She also continued her own writing, producing works such as The Last Man in 1826, The Fortunes of Perkin Warbeck in 1830, Lodore 1835, and Faulkner in 1837. Mary was deeply influenced by feminist ideals. She supported Mary Diana Dodds, a writer living under the male pseudonym Walter Solto Douglas, and helped her and her partner escape to France to live as husband and wife. Though Mary never remarried, she was known for her wit and flirtatious nature. She remained devoted to her son Percy, ensuring he received a proper education and supporting him as he became the 3rd Baronet in 1845. Mary's later years were plagued by illness, including debilitating headaches and partial paralysis, likely caused by a brain tumor. She passed away on the 1st of February, 1851, at the age of 53. Despite her personal hardships, Mary Shelley's literary legacy endures, with Frankenstein standing as a timeless masterpiece and testament to her extraordinary talent. Both of these women navigated lives constrained by social norms and personal tragedy, yet they each created worlds where women's voices held sway. Austen, with her incisive observations of human nature, crafted stories of love, manners, and social mobility, holding a mirror to her society and charming readers with characters that feel timeless. And Shelley, with her Frankenstein, born from personal loss and intellectual passion, pioneered new paths in literature, exploring themes of creation, responsibility, and isolation. And that concludes another episode of the Tudors Dynasty podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you love the show and would like to show your support, consider becoming a patron over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Tudors Dynasty. Over there, you'll get commercial-free episodes, early access, and some patron-exclusive content as well. If you would prefer to show your support in another way, head on over to my website, tudorsdynasty.com, and click on the shop to see some of the new merchandise that I have available. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.
The Tudors Dynasty Podcast.